Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about M3GAN, the 2022 film, which is a PG-13 horror film about an ant, an android, and named M3GAN, and a child, okay? And that child name is Katie, okay? So let's talk. So we're going to talk about the ant, the android, and Katie, the child. Okay. All right. So by the way, spoilers for M3GAN in this, and what I want to talk about today is how Dungeons and Dragons. There's a turning point with Dungeons and Dragons where it recalibrates how we respond to narrative. Okay. And I want to explore this through M3GAN. All right. So, first of all, I went to see M3GAN. I was really blown away. 5 out of 5 star film. I absolutely love this film. So let's talk about what this film accomplishes. First and foremost, this is an important historical film. Without a doubt, this is the best PG-13 horror film that has ever been made. I've seen a few of them. Happy Death Day. There was The Invitation. A few others, right? And all of them. Actually, I don't want to they weren't great. Most were really not that great, right? But I don't want to downplay here, because when somebody tries something and they fail, I have an incredible amount of respect. I highly value failure, right? People don't fail. A lot of times they achieve not failing by not doing anything significant, right? And Blumhouse, and by the way, so Blumhouse has done a lot in horror. I'm incredibly impressed with what they've been able to accomplish in horror overall, and so I really support. So I am kind of a little bit of almost like a foodie when it comes to horror movies. I don't like slasher flicks, so mostly I'm an A24 guy, right? So I see a lot of art house horror, right? But I was like, this M3GAN looks interesting. I'm gonna check it out. So I did, right? And I was absolutely blown away with it. It's incredibly, it's a fantastic film on 5 different levels. It's really just a fantastic film. But what I want to talk about is how I responded to it and how the people next to me responded to it. So first of all, I go to the movies a lot. I have a movie pass, right? And I really, it's wonderful. I can see as many movies as I want. Which is great, right? So, because I'm a huge fan of films, right? So I go in and I sit down, and I'm 2 feet from the people over on the right, and I'm 2 seats from the people on the right, and I'm 2 seats from the people on the left, and I have a third row back, right? And it's hard to get spacing in a theater anymore, because you're not allowed to seat yourself closer than you need to put 2 seats between you and yourselves, right? This is like a rule right now, because of the great pandemic. So these people come in and they sit right between the people who are 2 down from me, and this person's sitting right next to me. This hasn't happened in a year and a half. I haven't sat next to anybody in the theater in a year and a half easily, right? And I thought, that's kind of weird. And I think what they did was they ordered their seats late. These 2 people ordered their seats late, and then did not sit in the seats that they were assigned to, right? Now the reality is, this is no problem for me. I don't really care, right? Like, there was no trouble at all, right? Now, these 2 people were very talkative, okay? I actually don't care about that at all, right? The reality is, when I go to a film, I'm fully engaged, and for 40 years before the great pandemic, I went and saw movies on opening night, and every theater was packed, and I was jammed packed next to people, and people were talking and hooting and hollering and laughing and screaming, and I love to see the movie, and I love to see people's responses. This was no problem at all. But I was shocked that about 10 minutes into the film, there's a man and a woman, and the woman said, "Oh, this movie's boring." I was like, "What are you?" Actually, it was about 25 minutes into the film. And I was like, "What? She's bored. What movie is she watching here, right?" And then I realized, I didn't even know M3GAN was PG-13 until after I'd watched it. And then as soon as I'd watched it, I was like, I've seen enough movies to say this ain't a rated R movie, right? Like, I knew it was PG-13 about 2/3 of the way in, right? And I realized these people they're at a horror film, right? They're used to slasher flicks, right? And by now, 25 minutes in the movie, like 3 people should be dead, and like blood should be on the floor multiple times, right? But that's not what this movie was about, right? It was brilliant, right? And I realized, right there, I was like, that was the first thing. I was like, wait a second, something's different here, right? And I think the reason why is I'm a dungeon master, right? And so here's what I'm telling you. So a buddy of mine used to play Civilization, and he's like, you don't even understand Civilization, the video game, until you have 500 hours in. And I was like, what? Right? And I'll tell you right now, it is my supposition that once you have dungeon mastered or played Dungeons & Dragons for 500 hours, it completely recalibrates you to narrative. And you do not respond to narrative the way normal humans respond to narrative, okay? Basically, I was fully engaged because, like, I also hear people complain about CGI. Not for this film, but I feel like, oh, the CGI was bad in that. I'm like, what are you even talking about? I didn't see that, right? And the reason why is I am rooting for the creator, right? And I realize that when I sit in the seat to receive any story, right, whether it's being read to me, whether it's, a sock puppet, show, or a motion picture, I'm rooting for that creator. I'm rooting for them. I'm not trying to picayune things out. And the reason why is, as a dungeon master, I have created under pressure, right? And when you become a dungeon master and you are creating the way this rolls out, like, you realize far more than regular human beings do, because we've done it every week. We're creating, like, we are doing what a director does in a year in a week, and actually far more, right? Directors aren't they have entire teams in films, right, to do what we do. They give entire teams months and years to do what we do in a week, right? And the reality is, and we are expected to throw half of that out, right? Like, and change our story literally at the eyebrow raise of a single player, right? And so we are just a dungeon master, an engaged dungeon master, 500 hours plus of play, or world crafting, and then running sessions, 500 hours of of a player playing Dungeons & Dragons. We completely are recalibrated to narrative, and when we sit down for a film, we're all in from moment one, right? Now, of course, any of you out there that think Dungeons & Dragons is a game and think Dungeons & Dragons is about cutting goblins in half, you can step off. None of this is for you. I'm talking about engaged Dungeons & Dragons players. I'm talking about engaged dungeon masters, right? So, but what really got me, right, was the story progresses. So Katie, so you have the ant, the android, and Katie, the child, right? Katie's parents die in the first 5 minutes of the film, but there's just a flash of light. You don't see any, there's no blood, right? Like, and they're run over by they're driving up this mountain road to go skiing, and they're killed by a snowplow, right? And Katie survives, right? And she's immediately given to her aunt, right? And her aunt is a toy maker, and she is making robotic toys, right? Well, her masterpiece is M3GAN, which is an android that she has created to play with a child, right? So when Katie comes, she immediately she pairs the M3GAN android with Katie, whose parents just died, right? And of course, M3GAN is hurtling toward a release date, right? And so what happens is attachment, if you know about attachment theory, when parents die, a child often attaches to whoever gives them the most attention and care, right? And so that's what happens, is Katie, full-on attachment theories to M3GAN, right? Now, this is the part where it gets interesting, right? Is the aunt who created M3GAN demos M3GAN with Katie to her boss, right? And her boss's boss, right? And they have Katie in a room, and they have the android in a room, right? And so this demo is supposed to go really well, with Katie very naturally playing with M3GAN, right? But Katie at the beginning of the demo begins to cry, and M3GAN comes over and says, why are you crying? And she says, well, my parents died. And now, the aunt is like super, nervous and thinks that the demo is going to go bad. And the android says, hey, M3GAN, the android, M3GAN says to Katie, she says, well, you don't need to, she's like, tell me about your mom. And Katie says, I can't even remember any memories. And M3GAN says, can you remember anything? And then Katie says the story, and she says, my mom found a cockroach in my school bag, and the reason why was I wasn't eating my sandwiches, and I was leaving the sandwiches in there, and they rotted, and this cockroach skittered out onto her arm, and she screamed, and I thought it was funny, right? Now this is like just packed with problems, right? You're like, wait a second, your mom was frightened, but you thought it was funny. And then, but M3GAN says, hey, I know you're upset, but I want you to know something, right? I want you to know that the memory you just shared, you have it and I have it forever. And then M3GAN used her recorder, like her speakers, to literally play back to Katie the words that she had said. And she said, whenever you're sad, whenever you want to, whenever you're having a hard time, you could share a memory with me. And when you share that memory, I will keep it, and then we can enjoy it together or just share it together whenever we want, right? And then she sang a Katy Perry song, which was like Fire Away, Fire Away. And it was incredibly moving. And I'm going to tell you something right now. I cried. Like, I didn't sit in my seat sobbing, right? But tears rolled down my face, right? Like, and the woman who had said that she was bored began to laugh, right? And she just laughed, right? And and then the guy sitting next to me, he looks over at me and realizes I'm crying, right? And I took my glasses off and I just kind of dried my tears on my hoodie, and I was kind of surprised. And then I looked over because the guy was looking at it, and I looked over and he just nodded, right? And he didn't nod like there wasn't any. It was almost like hey, it's cool, it's not a problem, right? Which kind of surprised me, right? And here's what I'm telling you, right? Like, this is not uncommon for me. I don't weep in movies every week, but every 3 months, yeah, 3-4 times a year, I will weep in a film. I'll cry, right? Because I am completely recalibrated to narrative. I don't see the flaws of films I go to and stories I go to, and I see what the creator is trying to create. Because with my experience, I am trying to bring an open mind, an open heart, an open soul to receive this art that they are giving to me. And that is Gary's gift to me. That is Gary Gygax's gift to me. And that is Gary Gygax's gift to you, right? And so the reality, and I think there are people in the world who don't have this gift. They haven't been given it, but they can understand it. The gentleman who sat next to me, I think he understood that I was calibrated this film a way that the woman he was with was not, right? And while she was bored and I think she was rooting against the film, right? She wanted, more people stabbed, right? That was the entertainment she expected, right? And she wasn't calibrated to receive art the way a dungeon master, a Dungeons & Dragons player, is calibrated to receive art. Right? So the reality is, I cannot encourage you enough. Go all in on Dungeons & Dragons. It really is worth. It is worth your mind, heart, and your spirit. Put everything you have into it, right? I cannot tell you. Every day, I unpack a new gift handed from Gary's grave, right? And I experienced one when I saw M3GAN, right? I would not have received that film without Gary Gygax's gift. I would not have been able to receive that film the way I did. And I have great sympathy for that woman who never had this recalibration to narrative, right? And I'm telling you, don't miss everything Dungeons & Dragons has to offer. Anyone who tells you it is a game, in my humble opinion, they are the deepest, most remote, most lost fool on this planet. Dungeons & Dragons was never a game, in my humble opinion. It has always been a gift from Gary, right? It was he handed it to us with his own hands from 1974 to 1986. He allowed others to hand it to us between 1986 and 2008. Today, every day, the power of narrative, modern narrative, American narrative, powerful narrative, mighty narrative, echoes from a 6-foot hole in Wisconsin, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. He is calling to you from the grave, offering a gift. Recalibrate yourself to narrative. I think that's what Dungeons & Dragons is for. That is my humble opinion. I'm ready to hear your humble opinion. Please consider liking and subscribing. Get in the comments, send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.